going to help him. Let's get into that big news story, or the big footy story of the week, of course. It was built up as a massive game on Saturday night between the top two teams, Collingwood and Geelong. A lot of questions needed to be answered, probably more so from a Collingwood point of view, and they answered them emphatically. They absolutely dominated the game. When you have a look statistically, you can dissect it any way you want, but they were fantastic, as they have been for the last couple of months. They took a really good counter-punch from Geelong halfway through the second quarter, where it looked, sitting home on the couch, that the reigning title holders were just flexing their muscle and making a statement, and then they hit back in the manner that I think we've all suspected but not been utterly convinced. But I think we walked away on Saturday night convinced, and these stats would tell you. I mean, kick-to-handball ratio is really interesting, I reckon. You have a look at Geelong on the right, they handballed more than they kicked, which gives Collingwood an opportunity to really put that pressure on them. Contested marks, contested possessions, centre clearances, and inside 50s, all very, very much in favour of the Collingwood Footy Club. In the end, the margin could have been much greater, Tomo.
Yeah, look, I watched this game with great interest, and I saw an arrogance and a petulance from Geelong that I haven't seen for, well, I don't think I've seen before, to be honest. I think they just believe that their real quick hands and play-on style through the corridor was going to hold them up, and they paid scant regard for Collingwood's attention to detail, their planning, preparation, and their guarding of that corridor. And so many times the ball was turned over in that situation where they were very complacent.
Well, this is them coming back into the middle. And look, I suppose it's held them in such good stead for a long, long time.
That's arrogance.
There's arrogance maybe, but there's also, you can sort of argue that, OK, we're going to play this way regardless of what happens. We sort of know we're going to finish top four. And then the question will be whether they can make some adjustments if and when they come up against Collingwood again, because the Magpies, their forward 50 pressure is outstanding, but they did close up in the middle of the ground, and you're right, Geelong looked at it, they saw the numbers through there and said, yeah, we're going to go there anyway, so let's see whether or not you can stop us. And the fact is that they did, and they did it well. There was a period, though, in that second quarter, which is why there's still a delicious, if I can use that term, a little irony about it, and that was for 15 minutes, Geelong absolutely smashed Collingwood wide open.
They did.
Playing the sort of footy that has held them in such great stead for the past 3 years. And once they got through this ferocious zone that Collingwood have put in place over the past 2 weeks, they did open them up. They got through, and there was enormous space behind. I mean, this one here from Varco was a smother, and you have a look. It is a very wide open plane from that point forward. And the question now that we're going to have answered perhaps in the next 4 or 5 weeks, if they come up again, is whether or not they can get through with the consistency that will enable them to win a match.
Yeah, there's a few factors going against the Cats, and it's a lack of preparation by some of their players, some indifferent form by some other players, and perhaps some other players that have lived on the coattails of the team because they have worked well as a team, who are now getting exposed. And there's a couple of guys who maybe just aren't quite up to it. And,
who are they?
Lonergan, I really get the heebie-jeebies when he's got the ball down back. I worry a bit about his ability to handle pressure situations.
Hodgson hardly hasn't proven himself on a big stage.
And Mooney, look, Cam's a great player and everything else, but I don't think he's performing well. Hawkins is another one. Bartels, there's got to be something wrong with him. He's not having the impact. And obviously, his elbow's still a concern. So going into finals with those sorts of issues is difficult. But you're dead right. For a 15-minute period, they were sublime, and they're quite intimidating when they're in that frame of mind.
Well, they've got some breakout youngsters too, particularly in that sort of 19 to 22 arc. Beams is one, Wellingham's another. He was fantastic again on the weekend. He's really had a different dimension to his game. Yeah,
I mean, now we focus on the winner now and the outright premiership favourite, and we've known about their very, very good players for a long time. But this kid here, Tomo and I were both talking before the show, we had massive doubts on him over the journey, but he played with a hardness and a resilience and a sort of a class factor that has been emerging, I think, over a period of time. And he just adds to that midfield mix. He's no longer a guy who just floats in and makes up the number. I mean, he has a
good player now.
Impact. He is. You throw him into the mix, and you throw Luke Ball into the mix as well, whose numbers mightn't have been enormous. He had enough of the footy, but his tackling pressure,
14.
Just 14 tackles on the big stage in a massive game is a great effort.
You talk about the players. Was the coach playing a few games as well? I mean, would it be so common in a final not to tag Didac, to give Thomas the space he had? Ling was on Pendlebury. I mean, I think Ling chooses every week who he's on, but he's perhaps not getting the best player anymore.
Well, James Kelly played on Thomas, which is a legitimate matchup.
Yeah, but he was given a lot of space. And you're not, I think, going to see Gary Ablett and Dane Swan go head-to-head the way you did.
Well, it's an interesting one
final.
because I'm not sure who else you play on Dane Swan. I mean, Cameron Ling's had his opportunities over the journey and hasn't got the job done. So they'll go to school on it. Both teams will go to school on it. And I think
presuming they get to play again.
Well, we are making this.
I do agree with Caroline, though. I just said last week that I think it means more to Collingwood, this in-season stuff, and for whatever reason, I just think that Mark Thompson has a very composed, relaxed approach to these sorts of games at the moment.
You mentioned Hawkins, Tomo. Well, this caught our ear on the weekend. Darren Jolly on K-Rock, the Collingwood ruckman, was asked about playing on Hawkins in the ruck.
Absolutely. Look, I suppose he's not a genuine ruckman, and he probably just goes in there to force a contest. So I knew when he was in there, I knew he was going to be a little bit timid, and I made the most of that. When players like that come in the middle, you really just want to drive the knee in and make him earn it and make him think twice about doing it again. So hopefully he did that today, and I think we're going to move on.
There you go. Said absolutely looking forward to playing.
I don't know journo ever thinks that about me when I turn up to cover a story. Talking about dabbing with faint praise.
Timid. Yeah, interesting. But it's a lesson for Hawkins. He'll need to be
he's underdone.
Physical in the ruck in the finals if he's to hold that spot with Blake bearing down his